Hi everyone, welcome to Blockchain Brand again. Today we're doing something very different. We spoke to Joshua Chu, a lawyer in Hong Kong, on the JPEX Cryptoexchange case. If you have not watched our previous video on the case, we will link it in the description below. As a refresher, JPEX Cryptoexchange was investigated by the Hong Kong SFC for fraud claims. It is also worth noting that this is a developing case and facts are still coming out as we speak. So first up, who's Joshua? Joshua is a solicitor and also a chief risk officer for a publicly listed company called Collectibles. This discussion was recorded in the last week of September, and we discussed the case in general and the implications on the larger crypto economy. I've included the timestamps below, so feel free to skip to the relevant sections. You will only see an avatar of me because I've accidentally minimized my video. Alright, let's get on with it.
Not really has been touched on a lot in the, as well as there's a victims angle as well. I think all in all, most of the victims you only see is actually situated from Hong Kong. So it's actually an exchange that's clearly targeting the Hong Kong, because I haven't seen anyone or any claimants from outside of Hong Kong in this entire saga. So it's quite clear that it's actually, no matter what it is, the entity is clearly only targeting one jurisdiction, operating within one jurisdiction, even though legally speaking, they can actually argue that it's a multi-jurisdictional matter.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I think based on what I understand so far, the case obviously started on 13th, right? 13th of this month, and at the same time,
it depends on how you see it. The SFC have actually issued a circular about platform misrepresenting themselves.
I see.
All the way back on 7th of August. That's where the first circular came out.
Okay.
They didn't name this particular platform. But of course, what really triggered a series of enforcement action after that is that I think JPEX know that they're living on borrowed time and decide to escalate their operation substantially within the span of a month. And that's when the regulators really had to step in.
Would it have been better if they name JPEX?
It's very easy to look at it and criticize from hindsight, right? And at the end of the day, this is actually a part of a process of building experience, because it's not. There's always I always find this fallacy that the first thing that media always jump onto is ask, is it because there's loopholes in regulations, or should you basically do even more regulation? But you can't basically regulate to a perfect world, because criminals will still be criminals. In fact, I don't think criminals really care what your laws are, so long as they get away with whatever their criminal enterprise is aiming at, which in this particular case is clearly money. So it's easy to say, should you close the gap, or should you close the notice period? You should have done this or done that. But it doesn't stop the fact that even if we say say take JPEX out of the equation and just start today with the foothold on how things are today, it doesn't mean that another platform can't simply come in and scam the public until somebody, obviously, there are two possible ways. Either regulators are very on top of things, which is quite difficult in cyberspace. It's not like you can just patrol streets, right? It's too fast of a ground to cover up by human hands alone. So it's either law enforcement, which means somebody reported themselves as a victim and request for regulatory intervention, or crime prevention, which prevention takes a lot more. I don't think any jurisdiction as it exists have the capacity to patrol cyberspace.
Right. And I mean, the audience in Singapore, or at least the people in Singapore, they are interested in this case because so happened that we were having the token 2049 event.
Yes.
And they have a booth
And they
here.
abandoned the booth.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. So that sort of I guess Singapore got involved in that sense, right? Because they disappeared from the booth, and then people started asking questions like what's going on, and then the whole saga of this the platform being worn by Hong Kong SFC and whatnot, and then exploded into the scene. But it's also interesting because I was wondering why, as a platform, they deliberately set up in Hong Kong. Maybe it's just because I know they're also registered in Australia and other jurisdictions.
Registration doesn't equate where the platform at the end of the day is operating. The fact that the only victims appear to all somehow ended up being populated here in Hong Kong is actually quite an interesting facet, because it seems that it's just a corporate fail for you to use to say, oh, I'm a foreign company, but in fact all your central brain and control and operations are actually located here in Hong Kong. So the question, of course, if it is indeed an international criminal enterprise, then it requires international collaboration between, say, Australian Federal Police and Hong Kong Police for proper enforcement. But a Hong Kong resident can actually still go to Australia and incorporate a company, just like a Singaporean national can similarly go over to Australia and incorporate a company. It does just you can the traditional sense you can only go so far. So it depends on efficient enforcement. Really comes down to whether you have the expertise and resources, as well as technology in this case, to tackle these emerging issues.
Okay, specifically for JPEX, are you saying that they're based essentially out of Hong Kong, but they're registered somewhere else?
I'm not saying they're based out of Hong Kong, but I'm saying they uniquely only target. It seems that they're targeting only residents within Hong Kong.
Interesting.
Otherwise, you would have seen people going to the Singaporean police or other victims from other jurisdictions sprouting out a lot of police complaint. Look at FTX. Look at Three Arrows.
That's true.
And at the end of the day, well, despite the fact that our government love to basically make it's actually a very good opportunity, because Hong Kong's FinTech Week is coming up.
Yes.
And just by saying that you have legislation really doesn't get you very far. You basically have to flex your regulatory muscle. So JPEX is actually the perfect test case, right? Or for law enforcement, because it's such a small platform if you look at it. Despite the fact that they're saying, $1.5 billion, but it's Hong Kong dollars, right? It's not even 170 million USD. You can't even buy a luxury or those big mansions at Hollywood, or even a super yacht. Most super yacht goes on with a price tag of 250 million and above. So unlike Three Arrows and FTX when they collapsed, which had a lot of contagion risk, because you saw people basically conducting bank runs on other exchanges. JPEX, when it really imploded, that whole situation finally imploded, it didn't even register as a blip on the crypto market. Price sentiment was still strong when the SFC came out with the announcement. Market sentiment remained strong at the beginning of last week. So it is actually the perfect combination of not having so much adverse reaction to the markets, but at the same time have high-profile endorser involved that any arrest will be very headline-catching, to showcase that we are actually not just legislating but doing enforcement as well.
I think for FTX and Three Arrows, they are the quantum is definitely bigger, and at the same time
far bigger.
And it also involves institutional players, because like a domino effect, right? So that
exactly. And Three Arrows, those guys actually made it off buying a super yacht. So we know we know for a fact that they had a lot of much bigger war chest than JPEX, many times that of JPEX.
Correct. But what's the latest in the case? Because I know there are like eight persons or 6 person they got arrested. What is the next steps for these guys, and what's going to happen?
Now that depends on what angle you're looking for. I wouldn't go into too much about victims because the law firm that I'm also working with, we are representing some of the victims.
I see.
So I wouldn't go into take too deep of a deep dive into that until later when there's something that can be announced. So that you should might want to leave off for the time being.
Fair.
But I think what the saga also shows that because endorser getting into trouble endorsing crypto products is nothing new. The same thing happened with NFTs. The same thing happened with FTX. So it's not a new thing, but I think this is actually a very good case of what endorsers should have done to protect themselves from potential liability. I mean, FTX had a contract with Taylor Swift. I remember reading somewhere, or it was turned down, and she dodged a bullet, and it showcased that by actually doing proper legal due diligence on the contracting party, which a lot of celebrity endorsement campaigns don't really bother with, is actually very risky for the endorsers at the end of the day, especially if you're endorsing for a fairly big big ticket item such as crypto exchanges.
But for FTX, it would be difficult to do duty if let's say all the big sovereign wealth funds are invested and very well-known VCs as well.
But that's legal due diligence doesn't just stop there on saying who else invested, because that's not even the standard. That you really still have to look into all the transaction, and I think when FTX got into trouble, an illustration of a proper due diligence is the one that ZZ did on FTX, the platform itself, because he said he's willing to basically rescue them subject to due diligence, which obviously they did not pass. So it shows that proper legal due diligence of a platform would reveal a lot of things that is otherwise not wanted. If your lawyers is only going in skin deep and say, just because these institutional players are already in, and stop right there, then they're not doing their job in terms of due diligence.
Interesting. Coming back to the point on influencers or KOLs, would a disclaimer help when they are sort of promoting the platforms?
There are a number of legal techniques, of course, that they could have protected themselves. But I think what is actually shown in this particular case is what happens if they accidentally endorse what is now being alleged as a potentially scam platform, right? What we do know is that some of the endorsers prior to getting into trouble have actually showed off saying they already got payments from JPEX as the platform. Now, this is actually a very important lesson to be learned in that it shows several things from a asset recovery litigator's perspective. One, those influencers and endorsers, because they have contracts with these platforms, definitely have information that ordinary victims or ordinary users of the platform will not have, because they actually receive payments. That means they know the bank accounts involved are paying them. And from this information, they could have easily gone to the courts and basically applied for what we call banker's trust or asset, basically knowledge pharmaceutical disclosure order applications, in which case the banks themselves will actually have to review the information behind those accounts, including part of the package that will be within the scope of such an order will be accounts opening form, which usually would include identification documents that will paint who the individual is, as well as proof of address and all that will basically help you identify the party to go after. Also, if the influencers right before the entire thing collapsed can smell something is wrong, amiss, basically, it would have been more helpful had they, instead of simply going to the police and say they are a victim as well, actually done something more constructive, such as going to the courts and apply for asset preservation order, basically a waiver injunction or Marifa or proprietary injunction. What this would have achieved is basically, had they done it, one, it will look, the optics would probably look very different, because right now they're seen as aiding and abetting of a crime, so they are culpable for the crime that the platform is alleged of. Had they preserved the assets, at the very least, it would have been a very good bargaining chip for them to plea bargain with the authorities.
I see.
What we call bind over, basically plea bargaining, is that you've learned your lesson, don't press charges. And usually this should have been done before. It would be much better if this whole process had taken place, which clearly they have not come out and say that they've done an injunction or anything, with the passage of 2 weeks already.
But for the sorry, go ahead.
So basically, but this applies towards all endorsers that might actually later find themselves into a lot of hot water, right? Because by basically having a helping hand with helping some of the victims, even though if you want to say deny responsibility whatsoever, which you can still do and preserve your ground, it's a very important chip to have with on mitigation as well, which clearly did not happen in this case. So if they just simply continue to sit and wait until see what happens and do nothing, and the DOJ, Department of Justice legal opinion, comes and say you should proceed and press charges against them, then the chances of them getting out away clean without criminal liabilities is going to diminish over time. Now, just because they are not charged criminally doesn't mean that other people that basically suffer the losses because of representations they made for and on behalf of the platform could not proceed with basically civil action against them as well. So basically they're facing a multi-pronged level, multi-directional level of liabilities coming at them.
I see.
And this is basically the result of the fact that they didn't do proper due diligence on basically who they are contracting with. Now, disclaimer can actually work only to a certain extent. You can't basically write off all of your liabilities from it. Of course, it will depend on how the case continue to evolve.
But how far-reaching is this? Because let's say I put in an affiliate link, am I caught under the same regulations, or I mean, how far do I have to do in terms of duty?
In terms of the due diligence, no, I think you should engage. I think the minimum is it's a commercial contract, then you should engage a commercial lawyer to do it. As for the conduct of that, we wouldn't comment on whether each individual lawyer have done their job, but as have been demonstrated in the past, proper due diligence will review basically at the very least red flags as to whether you should proceed with a transaction or not. Now, if you on the other hand, you could do a due diligence, but the paycheck might look so attractive that you take the risk. Then you're going in with your eyes wide open. Which might even be worse if you have to. So it's a double-edged sword as well. You can say that, but what we are seeing is that endorser needs to wake up to the fact that because they're endorsing a certain product, they need to make sure it's safe.
Is putting affiliate links considered endorsing, or it's just?
Well, it depends on the factual matrix is not made out. So affiliate links, you don't just simply post it there, because from a criminal or civil angle, you look at it differently because the standard of proof is also different. From a criminal perspective, of course, there's intention and whatnot looked into. But if you're putting an affiliate link, then what's the rationale behind your conduct? You will have to do a lot of explanation anyways.
Because
and that's the risk. That's the risk of publishing a link as well.
I see.
I mean, if you look back earlier last year, we had the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case, and reposting, posting a link on Twitter constitutes as republication. So, of course, every single action will carry consequences. We don't live in a consequence-free world, after all.
Right.
So,
interesting.
you have to be very careful about reposting as well. It looks like a very simple action, copy and paste, but it can lead to, as we have seen, millions of dollars of being ordered against you.
Yeah. So what's next for Hong Kong? Because I know Hong Kong's aspiration is to be a crypto hub, right? Just like, I mean, Singapore is also trying to be one. Does this, put a setback, or I mean, what's going to happen?
I disagree with people saying it's a setback, because you need to show enforcement action to see that your regulators are awake. So I think this is actually an attempt at showcasing, and this is also a very good opportunity for the regulators to showcase their robust regime at tackling the issue. We're very early into this entire saga. At the end of the day, it's only been 2 weeks, and we don't know how it will how the whole thing will play out. But of course, this is if there's a definition of a certain new department's finest hours, this might be it. So this is still being played out in the coming days. We don't know. Maybe there's some innovative court order that comes out that will tackle this issue at the request of regulators or civil parties alike. We simply do not know. But I think that you need these opportunities to basically shine as well. I'll give you an example. When the Colonial pipeline hack happened in the US 2 years back, I think it's 2 years back, one of the things that made the FBI shine is the fact that they were able to retrieve 100% or near 100% of all the Bitcoins that was part of the ransom payment, because of a very sophisticated operational planning that they have behind the scene. You don't use regulations to basically achieve this. You use a robust, established practice to achieve this, and this really shines at how law enforcement and crime prevention network, because of actions undertaken by law enforcement authorities. In that particular case, they were able to basically safeguard and prevent Colonial Pipeline from suffering that massive financial hit that would have otherwise had happened. So, and this is how you also showcase technology, because unlike paper money, which you can launder very, very easily, it's very hard to encumber. You can't basically blacklist individual dollar bills, even though they have been doing that now with all the stolen ATMs in Germany. It's much harder to basically, it's much easier for you to blacklist stolen crypto, provided that you have the expertise, technical capability, and technology to do that.
Got it. And recently, was it yesterday or 2 days ago, Hong Kong SFC decided that they will publish the applicants for the crypto license. Do you think this is a step in the right direction and in response to the JPEX case?
I think this is a step towards answering a lot of pressure given by the Legislative Council members, but it doesn't really help the situation. The SFC was actually quite right to point out that, look, we don't want people to suddenly have a huge influx of crypto into platform that we put on the list thinking that they will get a license. What happened if for whatever technical or legal or regulatory reasons they don't get their license? What happened then? Who bears the blame, right? This is of course reactive. If you look at it on the other hand, what the US have done, OFAC for example, when you have issues of crypto crime in nature, what they would do is actually blacklist crypto wallets. So and add them to the sanction list. So that is so basically they already have an alert list for JPEX. It remains to see whether they're going to adopt the same regime as it is going to be as it had established in other countries as well. And this is a very good learning opportunity.
Because Singapore does slightly different. They put it on an exempt list, and then of course
exactly.
Yeah, so.
Exactly. But of course, we are talking about cryptosphere at the end of the day. Or if there's transnational crime involved, and keeping in mind the internet is quite borderless, despite the best efforts of governments, it might require more international cooperation. We have Interpol for a reason, and it might be the better organization to deal with these sorts of transnational borderless crime in the future, that it falls to the responsibility of Interpol to basically pursue the relevant parties.
Right. I mean, last question for me would be, do you think that this is how does it pan out? I mean, of course, we've seen a lot of things.
I think it's a step forward. I think for people who say it's a step backward, they clearly have no idea what they're talking about, just going with the flow. Look, legislation, regulation doesn't prevent crime. Criminals happen because they break the law. That's what you call criminals, after all. So it's quite absurd for them to say that, just because somebody is breaking the law, you're taking a step backwards. That's not how laws work in the first place. It's a combination of enforcement, legislation, enforcement, as well as education. And what we are seeing is that people are waking up to the educating part as well. What we're also seeing is that regulators are also getting their exercising the regulatory muscles that takes time and effort to build up. So this is a necessary growth process, and the fact that we are seeing it in a platform that is so insubstantial in the crypto markets, with pretty much nil effects on how the price performance of Bitcoin and Ethereum was happening the previous 2 weeks. It's actually a very good thing, because you're getting all the benefits of exercise, but without any of the fallout that comes along with what Singapore went through when 3 hours collapsed, or what the US went through when FTX collapsed. So this is like as ideal of a situation as you can get. Plus, you're getting all that media attention right now because of the KOL's involvement, not because the JPEX is so huge that it has basically wiped out so many people. I'm not trying to downplay the victims here, but what I'm saying is that the regulators have a very good combination of a mixed factor in this particular case to basically have the best opportunity to really showcase themselves. That's why I say, in a few months or a year's time, looking back, this might actually be SFC's crypto enforcement arm's finest hour.
Does this bode well for the adoption of crypto everywhere, or especially in Hong Kong? Or
well, I mean, this is how you basically gain those enforcement muscles. Look, crime happen. No matter how big JPEX might sound, 90% of wire fraud still take place within the traditional banking industry. Most asset recovery cases that I've been working on still deals with the banks, not crypto. So crypto, while it is very good at headline catching because how sophisticated it sounds, it's still a very small fish compared to all the commercial crime that's happening globally. And you don't see crime because of people committing certain commercial crime that people say, I no longer trust in money, right? People still need money, they still spend the money. It's a way of life. And technology adoption is really driven by basically whether the technology have been designed to fill a specific needs in a segment of society. So I don't think this is going to basically hit adoption. Whether adoption will continue on the right path really comes back down to how industry players perform.
And obviously the investors have to I guess also learn how to safeguard some of their assets, and also discern between what's a regulated exchange versus what's not a regulated exchange.
Then again, regulated exchange doesn't mean that you are living in a perfect safe world. Exchanges are never meant to be used as a quasi bank, which is a mistake that a lot of people have made. That's number one. Number two, you're still responsibility for your own finances, right? And three, regulated exchange doesn't mean that exchange will not never go off business. We have banks that are regulated. Silicon Valley Bank is a regulated bank, right? We have all these banks that failed at the beginning of the year, even though they're licensed, regulated. So don't be deceived by the wording that just because it's regulated, it's 100% safe. You still have full responsibility over where you store your assets.
Oh, that's a very good point. Extremely good point. Regulated does not mean that everything is sunny and you can just leave your assets on the exchange.
Yeah. I mean, regulated is different from insured. If you want to be safe, make sure it's insured. But of course, make sure that insuring party have enough money to pay as well.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just ask you the question on proof of assets? Or do you think that it helps to allay some of the fears that investors have when they deal with such exchanges? Or
you can have all sorts of methods to basically boost users' confidence, but at the end of the day, there's something called macroeconomic risk that you can't really account for, because just because you have the assets, it needs to be balanced off with the liabilities, and whether the macroeconomic environment can basically adversely impact. For example, if all of your assets is in Turkish lira, last year, it would have dropped substantially. So your proof of assets will basically be not there. I mean, so people need to also keep in mind, just because there's assets, it doesn't mean that the asset will remain that value over time as well. It really depends on what the underlying asset is.
Cool. Thanks for sharing so much. I think this is really, really helpful. I think